Hi, Gerhard Bloom here, once again looking at the tyranny and the delusions of the social justice movement. So let's look at this issue of race faking. That's right, people faking their race. And this moves entirely in one direction. What does the phenomenon of white people trying to pass themselves off as people of color tell you about this systemic oppression narrative? It reveals it as a lie. People of color now have privileges denied to whites and increasingly to Asians. Aren't Asians people of color? Oh, no. You see, they've been accused of being white adjacent, mimicking whiteness. No, you might not know this, but I certainly do. China had a meritocratic bureaucracy centuries before the Europeans did. Centuries. They have strong family traditions. They place an extremely high emphasis on academic achievement and staying in the lines, obeying the law. That's why they're succeeding. They're not mimicking whites. Whites could actually do themselves a favor by start mimicking Asians to a much greater degree. In case you didn't get the memo, Alec Baldwin's Spanish wife, Hilaria, well, she isn't all that Spanish after all. Actually, she's not even a little bit Spanish. No, she's not a member of the allegedly oppressed Hispanic community. In fact, she is so white, she's as white as the very non-Native American Elizabeth Warren, former U.S. presidential candidate. Why, Hilaria is as white as the very non-black Rachel Dolezal, university professor and former chapter president of the NAACP. This race phenomenon isn't confined to pointy-headed leftists. A recent survey, more than a third of college admissions applicants lie on their applications. They lie about their race. Yes, moving in one direction only. How many black kids do you suppose are saying that they're white to get into Harvard, Yale, Princeton, what have you? Zero. But plenty of white kids are lying, and they're trying to game the system that's working against them. I don't blame those kids at all. This is racist. They should be judged on the merits of their application, and race has nothing to do with it. Think for a moment what this says about the systemic oppression narrative. Prior to the civil rights era, a great many light-skinned blacks tried to pass themselves off with varying degrees of success as white. And there was no mystery there. Being white was, all things being equal, easier than being black. Black people prior to the civil rights era and during Jim Crow really were oppressed. In Nazi Germany, how many white Christian Germans, ethnically German, do you suppose tried to pass themselves off as Jewish? That's right, exactly zero. On the other hand, a great many Jews did try to pass themselves off as German. To be Jewish in Nazi Germany was to live in daily terror. Systemic oppression, yeah, that was real. Not to lie, it is today. So Jews tried, through whatever means necessary, to escape this oppression. And in case you're having a hard time following the argument, because undoubtedly there's some stupid leftists out there, I'll make this easy. There's a principle that explains this current paradox of white people trying to pass themselves off as black. All things being equal, people try to make their lives easier, not more difficult. People don't actually like to be oppressed. And some people will try, like our very non-Hispanic Hilaria or Rachel Dolezal, seek unfair social advantage wherever they can. So when you see the curious phenomenon of whites trying to pass themselves off as people of color, you are being gamed. Systematically oppressed. And people are lining up to be systematically oppressed? No, this should be a signal to you and the rest of us that this oppression narrative is a lie. Being a person of color now gives you a certain amount of unearned social capital. Think about affirmative action in the dubious careers of race-grifting charlatans like Al Sharpton and Jesse Jackson. They've made very lucrative careers of alleged racial oppression. Being black is the condition without which these guys couldn't have made their fortunes. And telling black people that they don't stand a chance, that whites don't like them, that they're going to be perpetually oppressed. Learned helplessness is a very real phenomenon, as is racialized resentment. There's been a number of cases where blacks have engaged in horrific attacks against whites, because they believe that white people are oppressing them. Oh, and also attacks against Asians. It's awful. And perhaps you didn't know that prior to the 1960s race riots, the black race riots that destroyed cities and set the black community in the inner city back decades, as shops were destroyed, grocery stores left, food deserts. That's not racist. Grocery stores were burnt down, and if you want a grocery store in an inner city black neighborhood, you pay a significant higher cost for your insurance, and delivery costs are more expensive because you're in a much more remote area. And it is a fact, people in the black inner city much more likely to steal. That's right. So your operating costs are much higher. And Thomas Sowell, the black economist, crunched the numbers. Yes, the costs in the black inner city stores, for the few remaining that exist, their profit margins are much lower and their costs are much higher. So yes, they have to raise the price of their goods in those stores to cover those losses. It's not racism, it's basic economics. So anyways, this, and resentment, right? This could be the white community. In the 1950s, got off track there a bit. In the 1950s, the race riots and previous race riots were whites attacking black communities, and innocent black people were killed. Once this tribalistic violence starts, it can be very, very difficult to stop. The trust is gone. The desire for revenge is very strong. Putting it all back in the box can prove nearly impossible. I hope you will check out my book, Deconstructing Social Justice. It's available on Amazon. Not important because I wrote it, but I promise you the issues are important. Thank you so much for your time and attention. Bye-bye.